Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. Rain slammed against the old window panes, blending with the slow ticking of the clock in Elena Hayes's small office. It was long past midnight, yet she sat there still, her eyes locked on the glowing red numbers on her computer screen. The company account was running dry. Bank loans, canceled contracts, partners turning their backs, all of it closing in like a noose tightening around her neck. Elena had once been a brilliant attorney, praised as the shining gem of commercial law. But since her father's stroke, the family law firm had spiraled into crisis. She was now carrying the company on her shoulders while facing hidden enemies, people waiting for the chance to destroy the Hayes legacy. A sharp knock echoed. The door opened without waiting for an answer. A man stepped into the dim room, tall and broad-shouldered, his black coat soaked with rain. His face was cold as carved stone, silver-gray eyes glinting under the faint yellow light. Adrian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Capital, the largest law and finance investment firm in New York. A man known for two things: absolute power and an ice-cold heart. "What are you doing here?" Elena tightened her grip on the pen in her hand, forcing her voice to stay steady. She had never met Adrian in person, but the rumors about him were endless. A ruthless predator in business who never did anything without a profit in mind. Adrian didn't answer right away. He walked slowly to the chair opposite her desk, pulled it out, and sat down, his eyes fixed on her. The air in the cramped office seemed to solidify. "Hayes and Associates." His voice was low and even, like a blade sliding over steel. "You've got only a few weeks before bankruptcy." Elena bit her lip but didn't deny it. He knew. Everyone in the industry knew. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his gaze cutting through the proud armor she wore. "I can save it." A flicker of hope sparked in Elena's eyes, but logic quickly set off alarms. She gave a wary half-smile. "What's the price?" "I don't believe you came here in the middle of a storm just to grant me mercy." Adrian's lips curved into a cold half-smile. He pulled a folder from his leather briefcase and placed it on the desk. A contract, clear clauses, airtight terms. Elena picked it up, skimmed through it, and her heart plummeted. "Marriage? You've got to be kidding me." Her voice came out hoarse with anger. "No." Adrian's tone was steady. "Be my wife for 2 years. In public, you'll be my perfect partner. In return, I'll invest, erase Hayes's debts, and guarantee your family stays untouched." Elena's breath came fast, her trembling hand resting on the papers. She'd heard of arranged marriages for power among the elite, but never imagined she'd be pulled into one herself. "Why me?" "You're not short of women willing to kneel at your feet just to be near you." Adrian's eyes darkened. He rose, circled the desk, and came close. The distance between them vanished. His breath brushed her cheek, the scent of mint and leather from his coat making her heart stumble. "Because you're different. You don't beg. You don't bow. I need a wife strong enough to stand beside me and smart enough to understand that love has no place in this game." Elena lifted her head and met those silver-gray eyes, cold but deep, hiding a darkness she dared not touch. "You think I'll agree? You've turned marriage into a cheap business deal." Adrian tilted his head, one large hand pressing against the chair behind her, boxing her in. "No, I'm offering you survival. Choose, Elena, the Hayes firm, your family, or your useless pride." Outside, the rain beat harder, drumming on the glass like the knock of fate itself. Elena shut her eyes, her whole body trembling with rage and despair. She couldn't let her father, the man who'd spent his life building the company, watch his legacy crumble. Opening her eyes, she stared at Adrian, her gaze blazing like fire. "Fine. I'll do it. But remember this, Adrian Blackwood. You can bind me with a contract, but my heart will never belong to you." He arched an eyebrow, leaning closer, his voice a low whisper in her ear. "We'll see. One night, you'll be the one begging me not to leave." Elena flinched, her breath catching in her throat. She snatched up the pen and signed the contract, each stroke of ink like a blade cutting into her heart. The pen stopped. Silence fell over the room. Adrian's cold smile returned. He gathered the papers, stood up, his tall frame blocking out the light. Before leaving, he glanced back, his eyes glinting with a dangerous claim. "Welcome to marriage, Elena. From now on, you're mine." Outside, the rain kept pouring. Inside Elena's chest, another storm had just begun. Music swelled, the lingering notes of violins echoing through the gold-leafed hall. Hundreds of flickering candles reflected off crystal glasses, casting a glow so lavish that it felt almost artificial over the wedding venue. Everything was perfect, to the point of falseness. Down the red-carpeted aisle, Elena Hayes walked in a pristine white wedding gown, a thin veil draped over her soft brown hair, her striking face set in cool composure, eyes gleaming with defiant pride. She looked like a porcelain doll, but unyielding, as though anyone who touched her would shatter her. At the far end of the aisle stood Adrian Blackwood. His black tailored suit fit perfectly over his broad shoulders, his tall frame like a Greek statue. His face betrayed no emotion. His silver-gray eyes watched her with the patience of a predator. No smile, no tenderness. Guests whispered, cameras flashed relentlessly. They called it the wedding of the century, the icy CEO of Blackwood Capital marrying the proud young attorney. A perfect couple of power and beauty. But no one knew that behind the dazzling lights, this was nothing but a cold, contractual arrangement. Elena stopped before Adrian. The officiant spoke. They exchanged rings. Adrian's hand was icy, his grip so tight it felt as though he might crush her fingers. Elena kept her composure, lips pressed together. "Do you take Elena Hayes as your wife, before all those present here?" "I do." Adrian's deep, steady voice rang through the hall like an unappealable verdict. "Do you take Adrian Blackwood as your husband?" Elena drew a long breath, her eyes locked on his expressionless face. "I do." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. On paper and in the world's eyes, they were now husband and wife. But her heart was still screaming in silence. Adrian bent down and pressed his lips to hers. A ceremonial kiss. But to Elena, it wasn't sweet at all. His lips were cold, forceful, the pressure like a claim of ownership. Her body trembled, but not from passion, from the brazen intrusion. As the applause died down, Adrian leaned close, his warm breath seeping through the white veil, his voice low and rough like a command. "From now on, you're mine." "There's no turning back, Elena." She shuddered slightly, her hand clutching the bouquet so tightly that petals fell away. Turning to him, her eyes blazed with challenge. "You may think that, Adrian, but don't forget I'm not a puppet for you to pull the strings." A dangerous glint flickered in his eyes. He smirked, a half smile that made her chest tighten. "We'll see. The game's only just begun." The reception continued under brilliant lights, well wishes, clinking champagne glasses, and gentle music. But Elena knew it was all a performance. She stood beside Adrian, smiling at each guest, answering media questions. They praised her as the lucky woman, the new queen of Blackwood Capital. As for Adrian, his face stayed impassive, but his hand never left her waist for even a second, as though staking his claim before the world. For a moment, Elena turned her head and caught his silver-gray gaze on her. No longer indifferent, something else lurked there. Darkness mixed with possession, dangerous and hypnotic enough to steal her breath. Elena inhaled deeply, reminding herself, "I won't let him control me. This is just a contract, just 2 years. I have to be strong enough to survive." Yet when Adrian bent down and brushed a kiss against her temple before hundreds of cameras, Elena realized her body was betraying her mind. Her heart beat faster, her breath came quicker, as if the fire he'd sparked couldn't be put out. That night, when the banquet doors closed, Elena slipped off her high heels, her feet aching from hours under flashing lights. She collapsed onto a chair, exhaling hard. Adrian entered, loosening his tie, each unhurried movement radiating a power that seemed to shrink the room. "You played your part well," he said flatly, though his cold eyes tracked her every move. Elena gave a faint smile. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? A perfect wife to display to the public." Adrian stepped forward slowly, stopping just before her. His hand suddenly tilted her chin up, forcing her eyes to meet the silver-gray ones. "No, Elena. I don't just want a perfect wife. He bent closer, his whisper heavy with intent. I want you to learn how to belong to me. The words knocked the air from her lungs, her eyes widening with a mix of defiance and caution. She shoved his hand away and stood sharply. You'll be disappointed. I'm not something you can buy outright with a contract. Adrian studied her, the corner of his mouth curling into a challenging smile. The game has only begun, Elena. And I've never lost. Their eyes clashed, cold, burning, dangerous. In the honeymoon suite, instead of sweetness, only two proud souls stood ready for a battle of wills. The music in the grand hall rose to a crescendo, red wine swirling under crystal lights. Reporters crowded together, their camera flashes exploding like a storm of white lightning. Elena drew a deep breath, keeping a calm smile fixed on her lips, but her fingers clutched the champagne glass so tightly it felt like ice in her hand. She hated this charade. Every admiring glance, every congratulatory word felt like a blade stabbing at her pride. She was not some porcelain doll to be displayed. Just then, Adrian appeared beside her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, his grip so firm Elena swayed slightly. She tilted her head, instinctively trying to pull away. But the crowd in front of her was too dense, the lights too bright. And then, without warning, Adrian bent down and claimed her lips in a sudden kiss. Cheers erupted, applause thundered, and cameras flashed like fireworks. The hall exploded with excitement as a wedding kiss, passionate and romantic, was perfect for everyone watching. But only Elena knew the truth. It wasn't a gentle kiss. His mouth pressed against hers with dominance, possessive, as if reminding her she belonged to him, that he was the one in control. Her heart pounded wildly. She couldn't tell if it was from anger or from the heat of his forceful touch against her lips. When Adrian pulled away, Elena gasped, her cheeks burning. He gave a cold smile, his hand still gripping her waist as though refusing to let her retreat. "Couple of the year," a reporter shouted. "So enviable," sighed a female guest. Elena kept her smile, but her eyes burned as she glared at Adrian. Late that night, when the mansion doors slammed shut, that smile vanished. Elena hurled her coat onto a chair, her eyes sharp as knives. "You think I'm your puppet?" Adrian loosened his tie slowly, his gaze detached. "You did well. You look stunning on camera. Everyone believes we're the perfect couple." "The perfect couple?" Elena gave a bitter laugh, her heels echoing sharply against the floor as she stepped toward him. "You kissed me in front of hundreds of cameras without asking. You think I'll stay silent forever?" Adrian advanced, step by step, his eyes like shards of ice. He stopped just a breath away, his powerful scent filling the air between them. "Elena," he murmured, his voice low but laced with authority, "you signed the contract. And in that contract, you are my wife. What I do is my right." His words cut like a knife, but the way he boxed her in made her chest tighten. He braced one hand against the wall, trapping her in his frame, his silver gray eyes burning into hers as though he could incinerate her defiance. Elena's breath caught, but she refused to back down. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze, her voice trembling but defiant. "I'm not something for you to display, Adrian. You can force my signature, but you can't force my submission." A dangerous smile flickered across his lips. He bent closer, his mouth just inches from hers, their hot breaths mingling. "We'll see, Elena. The more you resist, the more I'll want to break that pride." Her heart thudded, her chest ready to explode. The air between them was so charged it could ignite at any moment. Elena could feel the heat spreading, the dangerous spark threatening to sweep away her reason. She shoved his hand away and stepped back, her voice hoarse. "You can have everything, Adrian, but you'll never have my heart." Adrian straightened, his eyes tracking her, like a wolf watching its prey. His half-smile sent a shiver down her spine. "We still have 2 years, Elena, and I've never lost a game." She turned sharply, striding toward her room, determined not to let him see her trembling hands. But inside, Elena knew, from the moment his lips had touched hers, a dangerous game had truly begun. That morning, as soon as Elena stepped out of the car, a forest of camera lenses aimed straight at her. Shouts and questions fired off like bullets. Miss Hayes, can you explain this photo? Is it true you cheated on your husband during your honeymoon? The man in the picture, is he your ex? He claims you two never broke up. Is that true? Elena froze. Someone shoved a newspaper into her hands. On the front page was an image of her standing close to a man, the very man who had once betrayed her. The photo had been doctored just enough to suggest something illicit, like they were whispering to each other. Her lips pressed tight, her heart pounding. She knew instantly this was a trap. Someone wanted to destroy her, and through her, strike at Adrian Blackwood. Just as the reporters began to close in, a tall, dark figure stepped between her and the crowd. Adrian. He appeared in a dark suit, his face as cold as a war god's. His arms swept behind her back, pulling Elena firmly into his chest, holding her against him. The reporters faltered. More camera flashes went off. Adrian scanned the crowd, his voice rising low, deep, and so commanding that the noise died on the spot. My wife doesn't need to explain herself. He tightened his hold on Elena, his silver-gray eyes glinting like blades as they met 100 lenses. Anyone who comes after her will answer to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some reporters stumbled back. No one dared to ask another question. Adrian hadn't shouted, hadn't threatened, but the icy weight of his presence was enough to make them retreat. Elena was stunned. She had never expected Adrian to defend her like this. She glanced up at his composed face. He betrayed not a flicker of emotion, as if this were all part of some larger plan. But his hand at her waist was hot and unyielding, so firm she couldn't keep her composure. That night, in the vast mansion, Elena was still trembling at the memory of the morning. She stood by the window, watching the light rain fall over the garden. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Adrian. Elena! His voice was low, drawn out, like a quiet growl. She turned, her eyes bright with anger and hurt. You think I could do something like that? Do you believe those fake pictures too? Adrian didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, grasped her wrist, and pulled her sharply toward him. I don't believe them, but the whole world out there will. And I hate watching them call my wife a cheater. Elena lifted her chin, her heart racing. They were so close she could feel the heat of his breath on her skin. You're protecting me because of the contract? Or because your ego is bruised? Adrian stilled. His silver-gray eyes flashed, deep and dangerous. He gave a cold smile, but one laced with restraint. Does it matter, Elena? Whatever the reason, you're still mine. Then he bent down and captured her mouth with his. It was no gentle kiss. It was violent, fierce, a storm breaking loose, carrying all his anger, jealousy, and repressed desire. Elena struggled, her hands pushing lightly at his shoulders, but her whole body went weak as fire coursed through her veins. She wanted to fight back, but her reason was burning away. The kiss smothered her, a mix of hatred and longing, fear and a trembling she didn't understand. Adrian held her tight, his hand pressing against her back, pulling her slim body flush to his as though branding his claim. His lips crushed hers, then slowly softened into a deep, consuming kiss that left Elena reeling. When at last he pulled away, both were breathing hard. Elena leaned against the wall, her cheeks flushed, her eyes unfocused. She had never experienced a kiss so intense. You're insane, she whispered hoarsely. Adrian stared at her, his eyes blazing in the dark, his face harsh but with something fragile flickering beneath the ice. His voice dropped, low and rough, like a curse. Maybe, but only with you, Elena. The room fell silent, their ragged breaths the only sound. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding wildly. She told herself she had to hate him, had to despise him, but that kiss had left a dangerous crack in her heart. By noon, a thin silver veil of clouds hung over New York, muting the sunlight into a dull glow across the streets. Elena left the courthouse with a stack of files pressed to her chest, the rhythm of her heels striking the stone steps sharp and steady. She planned to stop by a small cafe on the corner to quickly review a merger contract her client had revised that morning. The glass door swung open with a chime. The scent of roasted coffee mingled with the warmth of pine wood. Elena chose the back table by the window and spread her files. Everything was in order, just 3 signatures left. You still drink cappuccino without sugar? That voice was soft, drawn out, familiar enough to make her spine prickle. Elena looked up. Lucas Ward stood there, gray shirt open at the collar, tie stuffed carelessly in his pocket, that slanted smile that once blinded her. His face was still handsome, but his blue eyes carried the grime of betrayal from the man who had sold her out with a single email 2 years ago. This cafe hasn't changed its menu, Lucas said, setting a cup down as if it belonged. He slid into the chair across from her. I was just passing by. The rumors about you, they're loud. Elena closed her file and folded her arms. We have nothing to say to each other. Leave. Lucas smirked. So polite. Since you became Mrs. Blackwood, your tones sharpened fast. Or maybe... He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for the next table to catch the stray words. You're just playing the same old game, climbing higher on the back of a man with more power. Heat rushed to Elena's face, but she kept her breathing even. I owe you no explanation. Really? Lucas tapped his finger on the table, his gaze flashing cruel. Remember who brought you into Project Phoenix? Who introduced you to the board? When the big firms came calling, you left me behind. You used me, Elena. Now you've just changed targets from poor Lucas Ward to powerful Adrian Blackwood. Elena laughed, cold and sharp. Don't rewrite history like some bad director. The one who sold confidential files under my name was you. I lost my job, got suspended, and my father nearly collapsed. And you want me to thank you for your introductions? Lucas faltered, then shrugged, his lips twisting. In war, everyone fires shots. Your hands aren't clean either. You're good, I'll give you that. But not good enough to survive among sharks. Not unless you wear the name Blackwood. He jerked his chin toward her wedding ring. Marriage for a contract. Clever move. Elena dug her nails into her palm, the sting anchoring her control. That's why you're here? To sneer? No. Lucas tossed a photo on the table, a shot of Elena in the parking lot the other day. The very image tabloids had doctored, pasting him in to spin lies of intimacy. I'm here to remind you. The press bites fast. I have more photos, more old messages. One phone call and Mrs. Blackwood's elegance shatters. Elena felt the blood drain from her face, but her voice stayed firm. Blackmail? Let's call it negotiation. Lucas leaned back, swirling his coffee. I need a contract pushed through. My company's eyeing a gold mine, but legal roadblocks are in the way. You clear it. In return, I forget everything. No headlines. Adrian doesn't have to rage. Everyone wins. Through the window, a black SUV pulled to the curb. Elena didn't turn, but she knew the plate. Her chest tightened. Adrian was here. How long had he been watching? In the glass's faint reflection, she saw a man at the counter, cap pulled low, reading the menu. Too ordinary to notice unless you recognize the broad shoulders and rigid stance. Adrian, silent, watching. Elena pinched the photo between her fingers and drew it toward her. You picked the wrong woman, Lucas. I'm no longer someone who closes her eyes for sweet lies. She ripped the photo in half, then into quarters, letting the scraps fall like dirty snow. If you want to fight, fight me directly. But this time, I don't stand alone. Lucas narrowed his eyes, smile thin as a blade. Right. You've got Blackwood, but you know as well as I do his power isn't eternal. One day when he's done with you, you'll fall. Just like you fell with me. He rose, leaned close enough for his breath to graze her ear, whispering, and you'll beg. Just like the night you knocked on my door. Elena shoved her chair back, standing tall, eyes black as storm clouds. Keep your filthy hands out of my past. Lucas chuckled, retreating half a step. We're not finished, Mrs. Blackwood. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, twirling it tauntingly. Sign my deal before Friday. If not, the press will feast. He slipped the USB into Elena's coat pocket and walked out. The bell jingled. Elena stood frozen. The USB burned like hot coal in her pocket, choking her with memories of the past. But the warm wood and grind of coffee beans brought her back. She inhaled sharply. No bowing. Not this time. Your coffee. The barista's voice, but when she looked up, it wasn't the barista. Silver gray eyes met hers. Adrian. He was close. Close enough for her to see the sharp bridge of his nose. Close enough that his fingers brushed the pocket where the USB lay. Blackmail. Elena swallowed hard. He wants me to break the law. In exchange for erasing the past. Adrian asked nothing more. He took the USB, holding it between two fingers, his gaze like steel. I'll handle it. You don't touch filth like this. Adrian, she started to thank him, but he leaned in, setting her coffee on the table, his fingers casually brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch sent warmth down her spine, making her armor feel unbearably heavy. I heard everything, he murmured, voice quiet but edged with command. And I didn't like the way he said, the night you knocked on my door. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like a dangerous line. I liked even less that he stood close enough to count your breaths. Elena frowned. You're jealous. His silver eyes paused briefly on her lips. I'm reminding myself, what's mine doesn't get touched. The words crackled in the air like fire. Elena's cheeks burned. I don't belong to anyone. Adrian tilted his head, gaze deep as an abyss. Then let me prove otherwise. He stepped ahead, holding the door for her, offering his hand like a gentleman. But the strength under that gesture told her. This wasn't a request, it was a claim. Outside, the wind picked up, tearing the silver clouds apart. The car slid through the city streets. Elena watched the tower stream past, her heart slowly steadying. She recounted Lucas's proposal, the fake photo, the Friday threat. Adrian didn't interrupt. He only listened, the veins on his hand taut against the wheel when she spoke of signing illegal contracts. Don't sign. Don't speak to him again. Adrian's verdict was like a locked bolt. Leave the rest to me. What will you do? Cut his funding, freeze his shares, cripple his credit, block his legal paths, and clean the media trash. He glanced at her. But first, I want to hear you say to me that you owe him nothing. Elena turned. In the dim light, his hard features softened, but his gaze was sharp as a freshly honed blade. She hesitated, then spoke slowly. I don't owe him. I only owe myself respect. The corner of Adrian's mouth lowered in something like quiet satisfaction. Good. That evening, rain returned, tapping against the glass roof of the corridor. Elena stood on the balcony, wrapped in a thin shawl. Below, the garden glistened with wet light, yellow from the lamps breaking across the path. The door opened. Adrian stepped out, draping his coat over her shoulders. His warmth settled over her back like a shield. Lucas will play dirtier, he said evenly, and I don't want you alone. Elena lifted her gaze. I've never needed a protector. Adrian stood behind her, his hand resting on the railing, enclosing them in a space of their own. His breath brushed the back of her neck, making her words falter. I know. He leaned closer. But I want you to have one. A shiver ran down her spine. Elena turned, stepping closer by accident, the hem of her shawl brushing against his buttons. So close she could hear Adrian's heartbeat, usually steady, now just a shade quicker. Enough to betray him. You're jealous, she whispered, her eyes dark. Maybe. His answer was brutally honest. When I saw him standing that close, the only thought I had was to pull you away, to make sure he never saw you again. You don't own me. I want you to choose to belong to me. His eyes locked onto hers, as though a plea was shackled behind the steel. And I'll do everything to deserve that choice. The wind swept through, carrying the scent of rain and oak. Elena felt the wall she'd built tremble. Lucas, the threats, the USB all faded beneath the silver gaze before her. Adrian, He didn't wait. His hand lifted her chin, and his kiss fell not in the violent storm of the night before, but a smoldering fire, born of jealousy, fear of loss, and a hunger he tried to deny. Elena clutched his shirt, her fingers digging into his shoulder. The kiss deepened, slow then fierce, bending every rule she'd set for her heart. When they finally broke apart, their breaths tangled in the damp air. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, voice hoarse. Tomorrow I'll cut off all his exits. But if he touches you again, he swallowed hard, eyes darkening. I won't be polite. Elena studied him for a long moment. I don't need you to be polite. A rare, dangerous smile flickered. Adrian pulled her into his arms. Somewhere outside, rain kept falling. But in this embrace, the storm had changed course. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. Night wind whipped against the glass windows of Blackwood Tower like lashes. On the 35th floor, the conference room lights still burned late. Adrian had just ended a call with the legal team when Elena's phone vibrated violently. Marcus, head of Blackwood Security. Ms. Hayes, Mr. Blackwood just left the B2 garage 3 minutes ago, and the screech of brakes tore through the receiver, followed by the grinding of metal against asphalt. Then silence. His car lost control. We're en route to the scene. Elena threw down her pen, not bothering to put on a coat. The elevator crawled like torture. B2 was an ice cave thick with the smell of gasoline and damp rubber. She burst onto the street just as ambulance sirens split the night, her heart tearing in two. St. Augustine's Hospital glowed like a white fortress. Emergency doors flew open, the gurney gliding smoothly down sterile halls under the glow of neon lights. Adrian lay still, neck braced, blood streaking his temple, black tire marks scarring his wrist. A jagged line ran across his cheekbone, where shattered glass had cut deep. Elena rushed forward, but doctors blocked her path. Step aside. The patient shows trauma to the neck and chest. Prep for CT scan. She froze, nails digging into her palms until blood pricked her skin. Marcus appeared, soaked from the rain, face grim. The brakes were cut, he said flatly. The corner camera was tampered with. We're sweeping the garage. Elena's eyes locked on his. Lucas? Marcus's jaw tightened. No proof yet. But I'll dig. He glanced toward the ER doors, his voice dropping. The boss woke briefly before going under. He asked where you were. Her throat closed. She turned away, dragging air into her lungs like knives. Don't cry now. Not now. The waiting room reeked of disinfectant and bitter coffee. The clock crawled, each tick dragging the night heavier. Elena sat rigid, eyes fixed on every nurse that passed, as if missing one glance would cost everything. A young nurse approached. Family of Mr. Blackwood? Elena jumped up. I'm his wife. The nurse's eyes softened. He's stable. No spinal fractures, just a mild dislocation, mild concussion, facial laceration stitched. The next 24 hours are critical for monitoring breathing and neurosigns. Elena's eyes shut. Relief crashed so hard her knees nearly gave way. Can I see him? In 5 minutes. And when he stirred, he whispered your name. Something inside her broke open. She saw his silver eyes again. Not steel, but a dark lake catching sunlight. The recovery room was a sterile white space, machines beeping softly in rhythm, with green lines dancing on the monitor. Adrian lay tilted on his side, IV in hand, neck wrapped in bandages, the proud lines of his body suddenly fragile. Elena hesitated at the doorway, afraid a step would shatter the silence. She pulled a chair close and sat. His hand, so often steady on the wheel, firm over billion-dollar contracts, was pale now. She touched it lightly, fingertips trembling like the first note of a difficult sonata. Can you hear me, Adrian? Her voice was thin as a thread. I'm here. His eyelids flickered. Slowly, silver-gray eyes opened, clouded with painkillers. He stared upward, as if shifting worlds just to find her. At last, his gaze landed on Elena. The corner of his mouth faltered downward, a rare crack in a man who always held control. Elena! His voice was hoarse, raw. His fingers twitched weakly until she folded her hand into his. His grip was faint but desperate. Don't leave me. The words scorched through her chest, melting the ice. Elena bent closer, her hair brushing the bandage on his brow. I'm not going anywhere. His eyes slipped shut, breath easing, as though surrendering to peace on the far shore of pain. Elena stayed like that, hand in hand, long after. Outside, rain fell again. Inside, the antiseptic air and the machine's steady beep rock them like a strange cradle, one for souls raised in fear, coaxing them back toward calm. She didn't know when she'd fallen asleep, head resting on the bedside. When she woke, the clock read 2:13 a.m. Marcus appeared, placing a warm paper bag on the table. Soup and ginger tea. You'll need strength to hold him up. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. The brakes were cut clean. A fresh blade. Someone skilled. The police, Elena asked, reported, but we'll run our own channels. Marcus's eyes met hers. Do you want me to trace Ward? Elena tightened her grip on the bag, recalling Lucas's cologne at the cafe, the USB labeled trash. Trace him, but leave no dirt for him to twist back. Marcus nodded. Understood. The door clicked shut. Elena blew across the soup's surface, heat fogging her vision. She wasn't hungry, only fiercely resolved. They would not touch Adrian again. By 3:27, Adrian stirred. His gaze was clearer this time. He saw her arm draped on his bed, her small hand still inside his, a promise without words. A flicker of confusion. He wasn't used to receiving care without guarding against it. Then relief. Elena. She startled upright. Are you in pain? If pain means you're here. His lips twitched weakly, the poorest attempt at a joke in Blackwood style. She shot him a look, tears stinging her eyes. Elena. His voice steadied, grave. Brakes. Cut. I know. She gripped his hand. I'll see this through with you. His gray eyes searched her face as if it were the most critical contract of his life. They'll play dirtier, he said slowly, and I don't want you dragged in. Too late, Elena shook her head. The moment you pulled me into your arms before that sea of cameras and declared, anyone who touches her will face me, I was already in. If you protect me out there, she swallowed hard, then let me protect you in here. Something shifted in his eyes like thin ice cracking under sunlight. He didn't say yes, didn't thank her. He simply brushed his thumb over the back of her hand, a gesture so small it could be missed, yet strong enough to warm a winter. Footsteps. A nurse checked vitals. Stable, but the family must leave by 4. She glanced at Elena with a kind smile. We'll allow you a little longer. Silence returned. Rain tapped steadily on the glass ceiling. Elena. Adrian's voice was rough, slipping into the cracks she couldn't seal. I'm not used to being this weak. You're not weak, she whispered. You're human, and I need you to stay human. A slow blink. Then very carefully, Adrian raised her hand, pulling her closer. Come here. Elena leaned down, thinking he had more to say, but his lips were already there, waiting for the last half of the distance. The kiss tasted of bitterness and night air. At first it was featherlight, cautious of the stitched wound on his cheek. Then when she didn't pull away, when her hand brushed the bandage at his collarbone, it deepened slowly, searching, trembling, yet smoldering. Elena closed her eyes. The tabloids, the USB, the cut brake line all receded beyond the glass. Only the beeping monitor as rhythm, the scent of antiseptic as incense, and the heat of lips that once commanded now quietly pleaded. She answered, tender as if cradling a fracture unseen. Adrian was the one to pull back first. He had to catch his breath. His forehead rested against hers, eyelids heavy, as though surrendering a battle. Don't leave me, he repeated, faint as rain. Elena smiled softly, steadier now. You almost died just to say that again? She brushed her lips lightly against his, sealing the vow. I'm here. The furrow between his brows smoothed, his jaw unclenched. For a fleeting moment, Adrian Blackwood, who had never shown his underbelly, let Elena see everything. Fear, anger, and the desire to live for someone. Outside, dawn bled pale gray into the curtains. Marcus's text flashed. Inside Ward's garage. The secondary camera caught a shadow, sending footage when you wake, Elena read, then switched the screen off. She would read it with Adrian. She tucked the blanket over him, then sat back down. Their hands stayed linked, not from fear this time, but as if signing a new contract, unwritten. sealed only by the rhythm of two hearts that had just stepped back from the edge. In the hospital's white room, the ice had cracked, and through the fracture, light was pouring in. For 3 days in the hospital, Elena hardly left the recovery room. She measured every breath, adjusted his neck brace, changed IV bags when alarms beeped, and even wrote down each detail the doctors instructed. The man who once suffocated her with arrogance now lay quiet, with stitches and a stiff collar framing him. And strangely, it was in this fragility that Elena finally saw the real Adrian, weary, vulnerable, and in need of someone. When he was discharged, Adrian sat in a wheelchair, scowling at the humiliation of weakness. Elena walked beside him, pushing the chair, her lips curved in a half smile, half mockery. Do you even know what it feels like to be taken care of? Adrian glanced sideways, the silver in his eyes dulled by frustration. I don't like it. You'll have to deal with it, Elena replied firmly, her grip tightening on the handles, because I'm not letting go. The first day back at the mansion, Elena insisted he eat oatmeal porridge. This is for old people, Adrian muttered, frowning. You're recovering from a neck injury. Unless you prefer chewing steak. Her hands planted on her hips, eyes flashing. Silence. Then Adrian scooped a spoonful, swallowed it slowly, his gaze betraying reluctant defeat. Elena burst into laughter, catching her first glimpse of an Adrian Blackwood, who wasn't omnipotent, just a man conceding to her victory in the kitchen. That afternoon, she coaxed him into the private gym. I'm not ready to train, he protested. Elena Hayes has never accepted no, she countered, handing him a 2-kilo rubber dumbbell. You just need light motion to keep your muscles awake. He frowned but obeyed, lifting slowly, deliberately. Elena sat opposite, watching each flex and stretch. Every so often, their eyes met sparks, flickering in the quiet air. Another evening, Elena brewed coffee, placing 2 cups on the balcony table. The night was hushed, the scent of roasted beans mingling with damp wood from the garden. Adrian took a sip and nodded. Acceptable. Acceptable? Elena scoffed. This is my special recipe, not the instant stuff you drink in your office. His lips curved faintly. I only said that to see your reaction. She shot him a glare, but her laughter spilled out anyway. For a moment, the contract, the scandal, the enemies outside vanished. All that remained was the sound of laughter and the night air wrapping around them like something almost normal. But fire so close to tinder was bound to flare into conflict. One night, Elena refused to let him work on documents related to the Hayes firm. You're not healed. Sitting upright too long strains your neck. Elena, this work is important. I have to. No! Her voice rose, eyes blazing. Who do you think you are, Superman? You barely escaped death. If you collapse again, who will carry the weight? Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes turning cold. You don't have the right to give me orders. The silence snapped, taut like a bowstring. Elena's chest heaved, her fear of losing him burning hotter than her pride. She turned away only to be yanked back. Adrian pulled her sharply against him, pinning her back to the wall. His breath scorched her temple, hot and ragged. Elena! His voice was gravelly, half a growl. You drive me insane. She wanted to shove him off, but the silver fire in his eyes held her captive. In a suspended moment, reason faltered. Their mouths collided urgently, wild, like flames finding fuel. This kiss wasn't the brutal clash of anger before. It was fervent, wet, devouring. Elena clutched his shoulders, her mind screaming at her not to, yet her body trembled and yielded. When they broke apart, both gasped for air, eyes locked. Adrian chuckled low, husky. You said you don't belong to me? Then what was that? Elena's face flushed. Just reflex. Reflex? He murmured, lips grazing her ear. I'll make it a habit. She shoved him back, her cheeks burning, but her heartbeat betrayed her wild, relentless. The days that followed spun between extremes, sharp arguments over work, over who held control, followed by stolen kisses that bruised lips and left breathless embraces. Neither admitted it, but both knew. The ice was cracking. The fire had caught, and neither had the courage nor the will to put it out. It was late. In the Blackwood Mansion's living room, the fire crackled in the stone hearth, painting orange-red streaks across the walls. Elena curled up on the sofa with a book in hand, though her eyes hadn't focused on a single word. The air was heavy, weighted by the argument they'd had that afternoon. Adrian sat at his desk, laptop open, but his fingers motionless on the keys. She was about to retreat upstairs when his rough voice broke the silence. "Elena, have you ever wondered why I chose a marriage built on a contract?" The question stilled her. Adrian rarely shared anything personal. He was a man who kept his world behind walls of ice, never letting anyone glimpse inside. Elena turned back, laying her book aside. "I have. But you never gave me the chance to ask." Adrian let out a humorless chuckle, a smile that wasn't joy at all. Rising, he poured himself a glass of wine and walked toward the fire. Flames danced in his silver-gray eyes, reflecting like cold metal. "6 years ago," he began, voice steady, almost like he was reciting a report, "I stood in a church, dressed in a wedding suit, ring on my hand, waiting for my bride to walk down the aisle." Elena held her breath. "Her name was Clara. We met back in law school. My best friend Daniel was there too, standing as my best man." Adrian paused, his grip tightening around the glass. But when the doors opened, it wasn't Clara who entered. It was the housekeeper. She handed me a letter. His laugh was bitter, hollow. In it, Clara wrote, "I'm sorry. I can't go through with this. Daniel and I have left." The fire flared. Elena's throat closed with a knot. The whole hall erupted. My parents were paralyzed with shock. Within hours, the press had obtained the story. Blackwood Capital, the name I'd spent a decade building, became the punchline of Wall Street. They called me the jilted groom. His voice dropped, almost a growl. I stood there alone, under hundreds of pitying stares. And I swore that day I would never let my heart become a joke again. He turned, eyes locking with hers. They carried not only pain, but the frozen armor built over the years. From then on, I stopped believing in vows, stopped believing in love. The only thing I trusted was contracts, because contracts don't betray. They bind with clauses and signatures. And if someone breaks one, I win the case. Elena sat in silence. Each word cut like shards of glass into her chest. Now she understood. His coldness, his need for control, his ruthless calculations. None of it was inborn. It was armor, forged from heartbreak, and his wound mirrored her own more closely than she had ever imagined. "You think you're the only one who's been betrayed?" Elena's voice was low. Adrian's brows drew together. "My ex, Lucas, pretended to help me, then sold me out. He used my login credentials to access and leak confidential files. When it came out, my career imploded. My reputation collapsed. My father almost had a stroke from the shame. I lost everything, even my faith in people." She gave a bitter laugh. "I thought I was weak for being fooled, but now I see we were both victims." Adrian fell silent. Her words struck deeper than he expected. He had never imagined Elena carried scars of her own. Their eyes met. The distance between them felt like two souls standing across the same cliff, both weighed down by ghosts of betrayal. Elena stepped closer. "Adrian, I understand why you trust contracts. I clung to the law too, believing only rules and signatures couldn't lie. But," she paused, her gaze blazing in the firelight, "do you really want to spend your life only defending? Will you let a traitor decide how you love?" Adrian's fingers whitened around the glass. He wanted to argue, but a fracture flashed in his eyes. Elena reached out, gently prying the glass from his tense hand. "I'm not asking you to believe in love right away. I just want you to know you're not alone anymore." In that moment, Adrian turned abruptly, hiding the redness, threatening to break in his eyes. His chest heaved, breath heavy. The memories stormed back into the church. The whispers, the pitying stares, the careless note. But this time, when he remembered, Elena's hand was there, warm, steady, unshaking. After a long silence, his voice came hoarse, almost raw. "I don't know if I can ever trust again." Elena smiled softly, though her eyes shimmered. "Then let me trust for both of us. Until you're ready." The fire crackled. In the wide room, they stood close, not kissing, not embracing, but closer in a different way. No longer just two people bound by a contract, but two wounded souls, each scarred by betrayal, now finding a way to mend through each other's pain. That Monday morning, New York City felt like it had exploded. Elena had just finished her yoga session, sweat still beating on her forehead, when her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She opened it, and blaring red headlines jumped into her eyes. The Blackwood marriage, nothing but a contract. Elena Hayes, from failed lawyer to bought bride. Accompanying the headlines were crudely doctored images of her and Lucas, a leaked copy of the marriage contract signed by both her and Adrian, and countless anonymous sources claiming the Blackwood family had never acknowledged her. Elena froze in the middle of the street, her heart aching with every beat. She didn't need an investigation to know who was behind this. Adrian's family. From the very beginning, they had seen her as a stain, and now they had delivered their fatal blow, either leave or be crushed under the weight of public pressure. Her phone rang. Adrian, don't read the news. His voice was low, cold as steel. I don't need to avoid it, Adrian. Elena drew in a deep breath, pride burning in her eyes. If they want a war, I'll fight. That afternoon, hundreds of reporters swarmed the plaza in front of Blackwood Capital headquarters. Microphones were thrust forward, flashes burst in relentless rhythm. Miss Hayes, did you really marry for financial gain? Are you nothing but a hired bride? The Blackwood family denies recognizing you. What's your response? Elena stepped out of the black car, the sharp clack of her heels striking against the stone pavement. Her white business dress hugged her frame, her hair tied high, eyes gleaming like blades. For a moment, the crowd fell silent, subdued by her commanding aura. Without waiting for an escort, she strode straight to the podium. Her voice rang out, clear and steady. Yes, Adrian Blackwood and I began with a contract. Murmurs erupted. Elena leveled her gaze at the sea of cameras, unwavering. But can anyone here claim that every marriage in this world is truly without conditions? You may call me a contract wife, an opportunist, even an unworthy woman. I won't defend myself. But there is one thing I am certain of. I have never bowed my head, never exploited, and never regretted standing by Adrian Blackwood. Her words cut through the waves of rumors like a blade. A reporter shouted, "Then what does Mr. Blackwood think?" Every camera immediately swung around. Adrian stepped out of the main doors of the building. Black suit, tall figure, silver-gray eyes as cold as steel. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as he advanced, stopping right beside Elena. He placed his hand on her waist, not showy, not rushed, but firm, as if making a declaration. Yes, Adrian's deep voice boomed, Elena is my wife by contract. The crowd gasped. His grip tightened slightly at her waist, his eyes sharp as a blade. But she is not only my wife in a contract. She is the only one I choose. A stunned silence spread. Then the sound of cameras clicking exploded across the square. Elena stood frozen. The man who had always hidden his heart, who had always chosen silence before the media and his family, was now openly acknowledging her, protecting her, before hundreds of flashing lenses. Adrian turned to the press, his tone like ice. Anyone who continues to defame her is challenging me, and I will treat it as war. Think carefully before you strike. Reporters bent their heads, scribbling frantically. Not a single laugh was heard. Within his arm, Elena felt his hand squeeze tighter, a silent reassurance. She knew his icy walls had cracked, revealing a choice not made for benefit, not bound by terms, but born of his heart. That night, the Blackwood mansion was quiet. Only candlelight flickered, reflecting off 2 glasses of red wine. Elena twirled her glass, her smile faint. You know, you really shocked me today. Adrian raised his eyes. Because I spoke the truth? Because you admitted that truth to the entire world. Her voice softened. You weren't afraid of your family or the press, and yet you still said it. For the first time, the silver in his eyes was not cold, but deep and sincere. I once swore I would never let my heart become a spectacle again. But when I saw you standing alone before that sea of cameras, I knew. If I stayed silent one more time, I'd lose you. Elena lifted her glass, touching it lightly against his, her smile both proud and tender. You won't lose me, unless you're the one who pushes me away. In the glow of the candles, their eyes met. No longer a battle of wits, no longer soulless terms. This was the first battle of power they had faced together, and they had chosen to stand on the same side. After the press conference where Adrian publicly defended Elena, the media went wild. But behind the scenes, darker tides were rising. Marcus handed Adrian a thick dossier, his voice low. There are suspicious financial transactions. A Swiss investment fund transferred a large sum to Lucas Ward's account. The intermediary is Daniel Carter. The name fell like a hammer. Daniel, the man who had once been Adrian's closest friend, his best man at the wedding, and the one who had disappeared with Clara, the fiancée who betrayed him. Adrian's jaw tightened around the file, his silver-gray eyes darkening. They've joined forces. Elena stood beside him, face tense. Lucas betrayed me. Daniel betrayed you. Now the two of them together, every disaster we've faced traces back to them. Marcus nodded grimly. Not just the tabloids or the sabotage breaks. They're aiming at Horizon. I think, he hesitated, they'll strike head on. That afternoon, Elena left the office to meet a client. The street was quiet, rain misting down like smoke. A black van swerved and braked hard. Before she could react, a rough hand yanked her inside. A sharp chemical smell choked her. Her last image, a door slamming shut, an engine roaring. Then darkness. At Blackwood Capital, Adrian was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone buzzed. One message, a photo of Elena tied to a chair, mouth sealed with tape, her eyes burning with fury. Beneath it, sign the transfer of Project Horizon. If not, she dies in the Hudson. For the briefest moment, Adrian's hand trembled. Then it slammed down on the table. The room went dead silent as he said, his voice an executioner's decree. The meeting is over. The abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts reeked of rust and damp. Yellow bulbs flickered above. Elena sat tied to a chair, body shaking with cold but eyes still ablaze with defiance. Lucas leaned back with his arms crossed. Daniel sat nearby, calmly flipping through a thick stack of documents. Elena Hayes, impressive, Daniel said dryly. But in the end, you're just bait. Lucas bent down, whispering in her ear. Adrian will never risk Horizon for a woman. He'll sign. You'll see. Elena met him with nothing but contempt. The steel door slammed open. Adrian strode in, black shirt soaked from rain, his gaze like blades drawn from their sheath. Let her go, Lucas smirked. Well, well, the abandoned groom of the century, now here for his contract bride. Sweet. Adrian's eyes never wavered. His voice cut sharply. Say another word, and I'll tear your tongue out. Daniel rose, tossing the thick file onto a metal table. Red letters stamped across the cover. Project Horizon, full transfer of control. All you have to do, Daniel said, disturbingly calm, is sign. You keep your wife. We take the biggest tech project on the market. Everyone wins. Elena shook violently, eyes wide, head thrashing. Don't sign, Adrian. He looked at the file. Horizon wasn't just a project. It was the future of Blackwood Capital, the lifeblood of his company, the promise he had built with blood, sweat, and tears. But more than that, bound to that chair was Elena, the woman who had broken through his ice, the one he refused to lose. He raised his head, eyes silver like honed steel. You want a contract? His voice thundered. I've lived by contracts my entire life, but there's one thing you forgot. He seized the folder and ripped it down the middle, the paper tearing like a gunshot. I also have the power to destroy them. Lucas roared, signaling his men. 2 thugs are charged. Adrian spun, his fist crashing into one's jaw, his boot slamming the second onto the concrete. The warehouse erupted. Doors burst open. Marcus stormed in with the Blackwood security team, flashlights and weapons blazing. Gunshots cracked, shouts echoed, and chaos swallowed the room. Amid the frenzy, Adrian lunged for Elena, ripping the ropes free. She fell into his arms, breath shuddering, eyes shimmering with tears she had refused to shed. Elena! His voice broke as he crushed her to him. I thought I'd lost you. She clutched his shoulders, body trembling. I knew you'd come. No matter what, I trusted you. When the police dragged Lucas and Daniel away in handcuffs, Adrian draped his coat over Elena's shoulders, his arm a shield around her waist. For the first time, when she looked into his eyes, there were no ghosts of betrayal, no shadows of Clara or Daniel. Only a man who would burn everything down to keep her safe. And in her heart, Elena knew the truth. The contract had turned to ashes. All that remained was choice. Back from the nightmare, the Blackwood estate was silent enough to hear every tick of the clock on the wall. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands still trembling after the hours of captivity. Rope burns blazed red across her skin. She had just showered, her damp hair clung to her shoulders, and the thin white robe wrapped around her felt like the last fragile barrier between her and the fear still pulsing in her chest. The door swung open. Adrian entered. His face bore fresh bruises from the warehouse fight. His shirt was wrinkled and his tie hung loose. His storm gray eyes locked on her as if one blink would make her vanish. Elena! His voice was hoarse, a single word laden with thousands of unsaid fears. She turned away, but tears still spilled down her cheeks. Do you know what I once swore? I swore I'd never believe in love again. Love had made me a fool before it cost me my career, my trust in myself. I promised I would live by reason alone. Her breath caught, fingers gripping the robe tightly. But when I was tied to that chair, all I thought about was you. I was terrified I'd never see you again. And in that moment, I realized I'd been lying to myself. She lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering like burning embers. I'm afraid of love, but I can't deny it. You already have my heart. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Adrian froze as if her words had shattered the armor he had spent years building. Then he moved slow, heavy, decisive steps until he stood directly before her. He bent down, pulling Elena into his arms with such force it was as if he feared she might slip through his fingers. Elena, he rasped against her ear, breath uneven. The contract is over, but you'll always be mine. No clauses, no obligations, just my heart, and it belongs to you. Then he kissed her. Not the compromise kisses of before, not the angry, burning collisions. This kiss devoured every hidden longing, every desperate thirst, like a parched wanderer finally finding water. His mouth was hot, demanding, desperate. Elena trembled, but then melted into him, surrendering to the storm. Her robe slid from her shoulders, revealing silk-soft skin. Adrian drew her closer, his hand trailing along her spine, urgent yet trembling, not just from desire, but from fear of losing her again. She wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging to the familiar strength of his shoulders and the scent that had once infuriated her, once unsteadied her, now the only place she wanted to belong. Elena, he murmured between breathless kisses, I need you. Not for the contract, not for pride, just because I can't live without you. She answered with a kiss of her own, deeper, fiercer, as if sealing his words with fire. Fear and pain dissolved into a blaze that consumed them both. They tumbled onto the bed, breaths tangled, kisses raining from lips to throat, from her shoulders down to the angry red marks left by the ropes. Adrian paused, his eyes darkening as he saw them. He pressed his lips to each mark, tender and reverent, as if he could erase the memory of every wound. No one, he whispered against her skin, will ever hurt you again. A shaky sound escaped her lips, not fear, but the tremor of being cherished, desired, protected. She pulled him closer, her voice a soft cry. I belong to you, not because of a contract, because I chose it. Flames roared higher, sweeping away all barriers, all defenses. They were no longer adversaries bound by an agreement, but two souls scarred by betrayal, finding shelter at last in one another. Rain drummed against the windows, the world outside forgotten. Inside, in the dim light, their breaths mingled in a rhythm that was both wild and tender. That night, Adrian and Elena were not the CEO and the lawyer, nor the contract husband and reluctant wife. They were simply two people finding love in the wreckage, clinging to each other with passion fierce enough to burn, yet gentle enough to heal. A year passed. The city's heart had shifted, but no transformation was greater than Adrian and Elena's. No contracts, no clauses, no suspicious gazes. Only a love tempered in fire, strong enough to last a lifetime. On their wedding day, sunlight spilled golden across the Blackwood garden. Instead of the grand, crowded spectacle the family once demanded, Adrian and Elena chose an intimate ceremony, just close friends, colleagues, and those who mattered. Music floated lightly. The air was scented with the fragrance of white roses. Elena stood before a mirror in her simple, chosen gown, not for display, but because it made her feel true. A thin veil framed her face, her hair falling in soft curls. She smiled a serene smile she had never worn during the storms of the past. "Are you ready, dear?" a gentle voice asked. Adrian's mother stood behind her, eyes glistening with quiet pride. The woman who once rejected her now whispered softly, "You look beautiful today." Elena nodded, her heart trembling. When the doors opened, Adrian was already waiting at the end of an aisle strewn with petals. He wore a classic black suit, but it was the warmth and certainty in his storm-gray eyes that made her steps falter with emotion. With each step, she felt destiny drawing her closer. At last, she reached him, his hand extended, steady, sure, closing around hers. No ghosts, no shadows, just two hearts beating as one. The officiant smiled. "Adrian Blackwood, do you take Elena Hayes as your wife? Not for contract, not for gain, but for love." Adrian's gaze locked on hers. Under the shimmering light, he whispered low enough for only her. "My only mistake was thinking love didn't exist. But you proved it's real." Tears brimmed, but Elena smiled through them. "Yes, forever." When they were pronounced husband and wife, Adrian drew her in for a kiss. Not fiery, not desperate. This kiss was warm, tender, the seal of everything they had endured. Betrayal, lies, contracts, and finally, trust, devotion, love. Applause rang, petals fluttered. But to Adrian and Elena, the world narrowed to just the two of them. That evening, instead of returning to a cold mansion or glittering ballroom, Adrian drove Elena to a modest home on the city's edge. The wooden door creaked open, releasing the scent of fresh timber and lavender. In the yard bloomed a small garden, dotted with the flowers Elena once dreamed of tending. In the kitchen gleamed the tea set she had clung to during sleepless nights at the hospital. On the wall hung a painting she had adored. She stood frozen, tears spilling. "Adrian, this is..." He stepped behind her, arms encircling her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Our home. No shareholders, no family interference, no contracts, just you and me." She turned, holding him tightly, her laughter and tears mingling together. This is happiness." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We walked out of ruin, and now we are reborn." At sunset, the last golden light poured through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. Adrian and Elena stood together at the threshold, hands entwined. He lowered his lips to hers, a kiss both tender and deep. It sealed not just their love, but the end of a long war and the beginning of a radiant new life. Outside, the garden swayed in the evening breeze. Inside, Elena whispered, as if vowing to the universe, "Love is real, and I found it in you." Adrian smiled, holding her closer. "Forever, Elena. You are my home." And so, before their modest house, not a mansion, not an empire, they sealed their journey. Two once broken hearts, now pieced together, beating as one beneath a sky washed in light.